Timothy 2:13. So, our daughter had slipped and fell face down in the busiest four-way intersection in our city. Embarrassment made her want to keep lying there, so she did not have to look up and show her face to many people who would know her in a small town. However, the worst thing she could have done was to lie there. This is a humorous illustration of what it looks like when we fall. When you think of her lying her face down in that busy intersection, don't ever forget that the worst thing you can do after all you fall spiritually is fail to get up. This verse just expresses again God's commitment and faithfulness to being our shield of protection. It is His faithfulness that gets us back on our feet and moving again. His unshakable faithfulness is a literal shield. I have an awesome mental picture of a huge shield out in front of me, completely hiding me from the enemy. The shield is God Himself. His faithfulness to His promises guarantees His shield will remain steadfast and available forever. But whether or not we stay behind that protection is our choice. It was God's shield of protection Jake Wise experienced when a mortar exploded, killing and wounding those around him, yet leaving him without a scratch. The testimony is on page 182. This scripture also tells us of God's faithfulness in our bulwark. According to Nelson's Bible Dictionary, a bulwark is a tower built along a city wall from which defenders shoot arrows and hurl large stones at the enemy. Think about that. God's faithfulness to His promises is not only a shield, but it is also a tower. From that tower, God is faithful to point out the enemy so he cannot sneak up on our blind side. Webster's dictionary defines the word bulwark as an earthwork or defensive wall, fortified rampart, a breakwater, the part of a ship's side above the deck. If you are on board a ship, the word bulwark gives you a visual of His protection. Throughout the history, there has been shields over individuals and groups who've stood on Psalm 91. Probably the most famous one is World War I. On both sides of the Atlantic, religious and secular publications reported the story of a, quote, miracle regiment, unquote, who went through some of the most intense and bloodiest battles without a single combat casualty. The best sources say it was a British unit rather than American. Our researchers have enjoyed rebuilding the bridge between the event at its sources and uncovering new leads to one of the most celebrated pulpit examples of the power of Psalm 91. Our sources says that every officer, as well as enlisted men, daily placed his trust in God by faithfully reciting the 91st Psalm together, and that unit is known to have suffered not one single combat casualty. It is unthinkable to believe mere chance or coincidence could have prevented so many bullets and shells from finding their intended victims. Dunkirk in World War II is another prime example. During the dreadful yet heroic week of May of 1940, when the British Army had been forced into the total retreat and lay exposed on the sandy shores of Dunkirk, many miracles occurred. Lying hopelessly exposed, pinned down by Nazi planes and heavy artillery, and armed only with their rifles, the brave troops were seemingly trapped by the channel with no place to turn for protection. A British chaplain told of lying face down in the sand for what seemed an eternity on the shell-torn beach at Dunkirk. Nazi bombers dropped their lethal charges, causing shrapnel to kick up and sand all around him, while other planes repeatedly strafed his position with their machine guns blazing. although dazed by the concussions around him. The British chaplain suddenly became aware that in spite of the deafening roar of the shells and bombs falling all around him, he had not been hit. With bullets still raining down about him, he stood and stared with amazement at the outline of his own shape in the sand. I'm sorry, I gotta say this again. Wait, I gotta say this again. Because this is powerful right here. Hold on. Although dazed by the concussions around him, the British chaplain suddenly became aware that in spite of the deafening roar of the shells and bombs falling all around him, he had not been hit. With bullets raining down upon him, he stood and stared with amazement at the outline of his own shape in the sand. It was the only smooth and undisturbed spot on the entire bullet-riddled beach. His heavenly shield must have fit the exact shape of his body. Note that Psalm 91:4 declares God's faithfulness to us as both a shield and a bulwark. He is using two military symbols of fortification and protection. He is our tower, our wall of protection in a collective sense, and our shield, a very personal piece of protective gear. This verse is indicating double protection.